I now call this regular meeting of Davenport Community School District Board of Directors to order. Could I please have everyone rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Director Poston, would you please read the board priorities?
Priorities. The Davenport School Board establishes the following priorities to ensure the academic success of all students. Provide leadership and direction to improve the overall learning environment in our classrooms, schools, and district, including the health, safety, security, and happiness of students and staff. Direct and support actions, programs, and activities which reduce the impacts of poverty on our students, their families, and our community.
Thank you, Director Poston. Director Beck, would you please read the mission and vision statements?
The mission statement: enhance each student's abilities by providing a quality education enriched by our diverse community. Vision statement: education that challenges conventional thinking, prepares all students to compete in a global society, and inspires our students, parents, and staff and community to answer the question, what if?
Thank you, Director Beck. Superintendent Schneckloff, would you please read the goals that we're going to cover tonight?
You bet. So our first one is goal 1, the continuous improvement on the district's path toward full accreditation. Tonight we'll be receiving a citation update as we go to the state school board meeting on March 24th. And goal number 5 will emphasis be placed on student achievement as we have a presentation tonight on some attendance data for tonight.
Thank you, Superintendent Schneckloff. We will move on to presentations. Up first, we have a presentation on absenteeism, truancy, and dropouts.
So, thank you, President Goza. So tonight we have Program Director Lisa Baxter and Marty Schultz, one of our school climate transformation specialists, and they've put together a presentation for you to mainly review absenteeism and truancy. We've decided to put dropout rates on another time because that was we recently received some new data and we didn't want to present multiple things at multiple times. So it fits a little bit better later on in the year. This presentation comes from a board request, as many of our board members are getting out and about into our schools, and they're noticing, different classes and interacting with teachers about what exactly does our daily attendance look like. And so this is a response to that. So I'll turn it over to Lisa and Marty for our presentation. There will be time for questions at the end.
Thank you. We're happy to be here. Brenda, you're going to drive for me? Go ahead. All right. So as TJ said, we are here to examine our current reality of absenteeism, and then Marty's going to get into a discussion of possible causes and solutions. We thought it would be helpful to start by grounding ourselves in our current ADA, average daily attendance. So this is a dipstick in time, and we just pulled this data a couple days ago. This bar graph represents all of our students, both in person and online. And you can see that as a district, by the green bar, that our current ADA is at 88%. So that means that on any given day, 88% of our students are in school or attending online. Now the goal for us is 95%. That's an indicator that's a healthy indicator, and that's what we should strive for. We broke it up by preschool through 12th grade. And you can see that our 4th and 5th graders have our highest average daily attendance right now with 91%, and our seniors are our lowest with 79%. So let's talk about chronic absenteeism. We know that attendance in school matters. Kids need to be in school to learn. But it's more than learning, isn't it? It's for social reasons. It's to access nutritious meals. It's to be in our extracurricular activities. There's many, many reasons why we want kids in school every single day they can be. And when students miss 10% or more days for any reason, then they are considered chronically absent. So missing any school for any reason could be because of sick, have to go to the doctor, could be a family emergency, maybe the weather was a little iffy and the student didn't attend for whatever reason. That starts that tally on being absent. And when they hit that 10% and or 89%, something with our data, when we pull it, it's at 89%. So right in there, then they're considered chronically absent. And the one thing I do want to point out is that chronically absent does not always mean low achievement. Sometimes high achieving students also reach that threshold of being chronically absent. Dr. Klipsch and I were here in December, and we went through this packet in a lot of detail. So we took that information, but we updated it to February now. So you saw this up till November when it was pulled the last time. And Marty worked his magic on this to give us a different look at this data using the bar graphs, just for a different view. So just to reorient you, this bar graph represents the percentage of chronic absenteeism at the elementary level. In 1819 and 1920, it's relatively low. So last year, 2021, you can see with those gold bars, the dark gold is in person, and then that lighter shade of that gold are those students that are online, and a big jump. Then at the start of this year up to February, and we just looked at that in December, like I said, our chronic absenteeism at the elementary was 23.7%. If you look at the dark purple, it is now at 36.2% for in-person instruction. And then the light shades of that green and purple represent the online students from November to February. Again, we now have more students considered chronically absent. The next slide is the same view at the intermediate level. Again, those first 2 years, 21.1, 28.8. We have that big jump when we returned to school and online instruction in 2021. The green represents where we were for in-person and online instruction at November, when we reported to you in December. And you can see now in February the increase of chronic absenteeism for both in-person and online instruction. This last slide is the same view for our high schoolers. You'll note in general, a lot of these numbers are higher. And the other thing to note is for our online instruction, it was much lower in November of this year compared to February of this year. And Marty dug into that just a little bit, and he's going to share some information of that, and then he will take us through the rest of the slides.
So, Director Beck, I saw your kind of startled look. We had the same look when we saw this data. So I reached out to Bill Schnaden, who's our pandemic response coordinator, and so he does some of the coordinating of like our online SSL people who support online learners. And there's kind of potentially 2 or 3 factors at play with that number. Number one, we have to remember that this bar graph is generated when kids pass a threshold. So we're kids, if they were close to 10% of days absent in November, and then since then they've had more absences and more, they've outpaced their in-person attendance days or their in-attendance days. That could be a factor of it. The other thing to consider is that in between the November number and this number, we were starting to question some of our practices because some of the SSLs were being very diligent about tracking with students and things like that. But there's not one SSL for every building. And so those SSLs get pulled into other areas of responsibility sometimes, if they're helping with lunchroom, cafeteria monitoring, things like that, or they have larger percentages of kids at a school. And so they looked into that, and previously, like last year in Edgenuity, students would have to log into Infinite Campus separately and mark themselves present on a given day to be counted. And we noted a lot of kids just didn't do that. They were still participating in Edgenuity. They weren't logging in. This year, they changed that. So instead, we are defaulting them to be present in campus. And then it was the job of the SSL or another staff member in the building to check in Edgenuity and see if that student logged in and interacted with that system on a given day. And so we found, like I said, and it was either late November or December, I just learned about this too, that wasn't consistently being done across the district. So they were able to go back and look at those students and say, gosh, because we can see on, it's just a spreadsheet of how many days they did. So part of the increase in this is that we weren't getting all of those students who had been absent and they weren't tracking that correctly. And so that data has been updated since then. So again, apologies on that, but that's what we think is going on there. Also, it's not okay. Like nobody's okay with that number. And we're also seeing that, as you would expect, the kids who are not logging in on a day-to-day basis with Edgenuity are also struggling to maintain their grades in that program. So if you want to do the next slide, Brenda. This is the same data from the previous graphs, but now this is the whole district. And so this is in-person chronic absenteeism, but it's disaggregated by our subgroups. And so as our focus is on equity and equality within the district, we want to make sure that we're upfront about those numbers. As you can see, we see similar disproportionality between subgroups that we see in a lot of other pieces of our data, where some groups are conventionally doing better and attending more often than other groups are. You can do the next one. And again, this is, same data, but the whole district and for students who are engaged in online only. And so again, you can see the differences from November to February. And this, again, you're going to see those jumps in chronic absenteeism based on those two factors that I mentioned previously. Brenda, yeah, okay. So we've been kind of thinking about this problem. It's not that we weren't thinking about it before, but we thought it would be helpful to kind of organize this way, because obviously, like, school attendance is a complicated issue. There are things that we certainly have control over within the district, and there's things that we have much less control over. So, and then there's some things kind of in the middle. So when I look at that, the things within our control are the school climate and culture within our buildings. And the inference there is that if we have a school environment that kids enjoy being in, they're more likely to come to school that day. If there are kids who are responsible for themselves getting to school, they're going to make the effort to do that. Obviously, we have a lot of kids who aren't responsible for whether or not they get to school. They're relying on a parent to be the responsible party as they should. We can also reevaluate our discipline and our suspension policies, because if a student is suspended, and obviously that plays into school climate as well, if we're being preventative and proactive in managing behavior and reducing the level of suspension, that plays into our ADA as well. I have up there also identification of families who qualify for support services. So for example, you guys might know I'm also the homeless liaison in the district, and one of the supports that we are required to give to families who become homeless is that if they end up moving across town, we try to keep them connected in their building of origin, the school they were when they became unsheltered or when they had to double up with another family or go into shelter. And so the problem is our families don't always know to tell us that that happened to them. And so if we're doing a good job of identifying those families, then we can make sure we're targeting supports and we're helping them get to school, because homelessness and other issues related to poverty have an impact on student attendance. We can also reevaluate our transportation and our busing policies and make sure that we have them equitably apportioned. And then, of course, we can look at all of the interventions that we can find and be as proactive as possible. And I'm going to give you an example of one thing that we already do along that. So those are the things that are within our control. There are also those areas that we have some influence over, but not total influence over. So student and family engagement, right? We can do everything that we can. If there's a student who's just decides they're not coming to school or their family's not engaged, or issues like that, there's some middle ground there for us. Access to healthcare and vaccinations. It's a legal requirement that students receive their vaccinations. We're not talking about the COVID vaccine. We're talking about all of the traditional vaccines. Families have some time to get those in, and after a certain time, if they don't have another special qualification or deferment, then that can be a factor where they're not allowed to come back to school until they can show that. So we can be proactive in helping families access that. At the end of the day, if families aren't doing that, our hands are a little bit tied there. Another one is, if we're being honest, changing societal expectations about school. That's, in my mind, is related to the pandemic. But consider, I'll use my own, this is anecdotal evidence, right? But my kindergartner has missed a lot of school this year because he hasn't been exposed to, like, we didn't do online kindergarten. We decided to delay him for a year because it didn't make sense. We didn't feel for kindergarten for our son. He's never been a daycare kid, and he didn't go to preschool. So he's getting his first exposure to large groups of kids, right? He's getting sick a lot. He has an older brother, and when his younger brother gets sick, sometimes, especially during the Omicron surge, we were like, you know what? We're not going to send our older son to school until we're sure that our younger son doesn't have COVID, right? So I think those are the kind of things that parents are weighing those decisions of, do I send a kid or not? And then also just the fact of, we were in hybrid learning for a while. Kids aren't used to going to school as much, and so I think there's less pressure and less from parents who are motivated to say, no, you've got to go to school today. And then lastly, the online learning environment. We have kids who are not very well supervised when they're in their online learning environment. Parents have agreed that they're going to be the ones who are in charge of that and responsible for making sure kids are doing that. We can encourage and we can call and we can remind, but at the end of the day, we can't go to a child's house and say, we need you to log on to Edgenuity today. So that plays a factor for those. And then the things outside of our control, and this is not making an excuse, but again, pandemic has brought a lot of challenges. Like, we see that immediate spike in our data in the year that the pandemic went into effect. We don't control the CDC and their recommendations for number of days of quarantine when somebody in a household tests positive. The quarantine has said, or I'm sorry, the pandemic has also, we've seen rising homelessness, which, like I mentioned earlier, plays a significant, we see attendance issues for families that go through transitions like that. We've identified close to 325 students already this year. We identified about 250 students last year, the entire year. So we're well ahead of our rate. And then we, again, pandemic related, just the increased amount of mental health concerns that we're seeing our students expressing and their parents telling us about. And that impacts their ability to get up and get motivated to go to school the next day. So I'll go to the next slide, Brenda. I wanted to give you just real quick one example, like I mentioned, of those kind of proactive measures that we can sometimes take. There's an organization called Attendance Works. That's a nonprofit that provides, common sense measures and kind of a structured approach. I believe it was founded maybe 10 or 15 years ago, based on some grant-funded research that showed that kids who are chronically absent in the younger years, obviously that plays a factor in their ability to be successful later on. And so we do have, I think, in three buildings, AmeriCorps volunteers who already use this framework. And we also have our family involvement liaisons that do a piece of this, sometimes our student support liaisons, and going through all of these things. So doing our best to engage students and their parents, encouraging them to come to school, having recognition for kids with good attendance and providing incentives for those. Again, tracking accurate data, monitoring attendance and data patterns. And again, then getting into even personalized early outreach when we see trends of kids that are starting to miss a lot of days, and then ultimately developing those programmatic response barriers, response to barriers. So we're kind of engaged in that process right now. Like, our district focus is PBIS, and that's really predicated on school climate and culture. PBIS is a multi-tiered system of support. And so it's based on data, and we're still getting better at doing that and including attendance into that conversation. But looking at, tier 1, making sure we've got all of our baseline, everybody gets this. Tier 2, we can see kids that are starting to go trend in the negative direction and starting to add more interventions, and then personalized targeted interventions for kids that are really struggling. I just wanted to bring this back. This is a slide that you saw in November with Jake and Lisa, and it just lists, again, all of the current actions that we're using in the district to try to improve average daily attendance, some of the conversations we've had for programs and strategies that are in the middle of considerations to improve. That, again, those are things that are hard to change mid-year, but are systematic changes that we would look at. And then we have some barriers to improve and then opportunities to improve. So we added a few things there in the blue under barriers, again, just because talking about, pandemic-related challenges and homelessness. But
I want to highlight, Brenda, will you please go back to the attendance work framework? The data is very clear at what works with improving attendance is building strong relationships through that process. And then Brenda, if you would go back, you look at the current actions that we are implementing. It's all about building relationships, attendance coaches, attendance contracts, reaching out, calling. What's the reason for it? The punitive angle has not been very successful in Davenport. The success comes from building very strong relationships at the same time of building very engaging classrooms. And so that's the grounded work of the attendance works. And there's a website for it. If anybody cares to peruse it, we'll send it to the board too. So with that being said, thank you for your presentation. Are there any questions that the board have at this time?
Director Hayes.
It's not really a question, more of a statement, I guess, with all the technology out. It just kind of baffles me that we're having a tough time measuring the online. You would think with them being at home and access to it, how can we not tell when they're there? If they forget, you forget it sometime, but there should be a more positive way to measure whether or not you're on.
Mm-hmm. If I could respond, so I think you're absolutely right, and I think it's that learning curve of we haven't been doing online learning in this way for very long. And so, like I said, the metric changed. It used to be they had to log in on their own, and then this year the decision was we need somebody to proactively go in and monitor that. And so that was internal communication of who's going to do that, because at the end of the day, even with the technology, you need somebody who's going to go and check that data. Mm-hmm. So you're absolutely right.
Director Hayes, can I jump in with a comment? One of the pieces that I think Marty, Mr. Schultz referred to that I think is important to keep in mind is this is all relatively new to us. And so we are monitoring attendance the same way that we're monitoring in-person, online versus not. Part of the allure, right or wrong, is people can say, so I can do my online learning on Sunday night if I want. I can do it Monday afternoon. So we're still saying Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday is when our kids come to school, we take attendance. And we're currently monitoring attendance in the same way, where it's just a different platform for learning. So I think that that's going to be part of the evolution is it about being on 5 days a week, or is it about progressing through the material? And if that's on a Saturday morning, then that's on a Saturday morning. So those are going to be part of it as well. Right now, our data is showing, trying to compare two different things monitored the same way. And I think that's part of the challenge.
Director Klein-Jerome.
Next time we see this, could we get so the high school online in February was 65.5, but I don't know if that 100 kids, is it 500 kids? I need a real number to it, not a percentage on all of these, just so I can get a feel for really how many kids are gone. I mean, 65% is not acceptable, but it also makes a difference if it's 10 kids, 100 kids, 500, whatever. And the same for in-person. Thank you.
Director Beck.
So I have 3 questions, kind of all related. So I noticed the first couple slides you showed us, seniors had the lowest level of attendance. And I've heard, especially when I first joined the board, dissatisfaction with the number of classes seniors are required to be taking. And so does that factor into it? Like they're kind of still counted as students, but somehow can only have to take 1 or 2 classes in a day, which I guess in my brain that didn't happen when I went to high school. So I don't know how that works, but is that potentially part of it?
I'm not certain.
Yes, that is actually, when the ADA is pulled, if a student takes 3 out of 4 blocks, then it assumes that they're a 4-block student. So that is why those numbers are always petering off at the 11th and 12th grade level, which is not to make it okay that 9th, 10th, 11th decrease is consistent from district to district. There's always this drop off like that for a variety of reasons, but that's probably one of them.
Okay. So my second question is, with the November to February data, I guess it may depend on numbers, but I know I'm less likely to do a lot of stuff in February that I was really willing to do in November, just because it's still cold, it's still dark, I'm tired, I've been doing this for several months, you know, and I'm a teacher, right? And so it just gets progressively harder. So do we typically see an increase in absenteeism sort of towards the end of winter?
I would have to, oops, sorry. I would, Jake, do you know for sure, or were you going to say? But I would want to really look at that instead of give you an off-the-cuff answer. My inference would be that, but I'm not positive.
So 3 times a year, there's the state reporting in Iowa, upload fall, winter, and spring. And granted, I've only looked at 2 years, so it could be different pre-COVID, but it didn't trend much differently. I mean, our kids are, and across the grade levels, it looks similar at those times. So fall would be October, it's pulled, and winter is the very end of January, and spring is June. So it catches all the school days between those 3 terms. Okay. I agree with you. Winter is tough, and you'd think your average daily attendance as a principal, usually you see, oh, we're 94 or 95, but then we might dip a little bit when it's cold and flu season, pre-COVID. But yeah, in terms of kids who are chronically absent, that tends to be a habit that exists throughout the school year.
Okay. And then my last question was, with the online school, are we keeping this forever and ever? Or is this, like, I know we went to it with the pandemic, right? And then, you know, it's one thing if we're keeping it forever and ever as an option. It's another thing if we're expecting to phase it out over the next year or 2. And I don't have any inkling one way or the other, but I would say I'm wondering if we do keep up with online schooling, you know, is there a way that we can set certain criteria, attendance criteria, grade point average criteria, you know, parental contracts of supervision for younger kids, something like that, because even my college students who are online don't, unless I have assignments due twice a week, they won't do them until very last day, and you don't learn that way.
Mm-hmm. Were you zooming in on our cabinet meeting?
Apparently.
So to follow up on that, in order for us to compete, Des Moines has an online school, CAM. We feel strongly that we need to have some version of that. Otherwise, we will have we need to compete and provide an arena for our students. But that doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to allow students to not show up, not engage. And so our cabinet was discussing, what does that look like? And, you know, what are the timelines? And we're not going to be able to hop back and forth. During the pandemic, you know, the way things were changing all the time, we needed to have such flexibility for our students. And as we move forward, it'll be more systemic. There will be all of those things that you talked about in some form or fashion, because if you're not successful in a certain arena, why would we continue to allow that in that arena? So that's kind of the mindset that we have. The other thing was the pandemic. We were building things so fast just to provide them. Now we have the opportunity to really be intentional about it, and so we have a lot of work to do in the online arena. But that's the direction we're heading. Thank you for that question.
Thanks.
Hang on a sec. Director Poston, did you have something?
So what you're saying, Superintendent Snakeloth, so are we competing for dollars, or are we competing to educate our children?
So we have to provide an opportunity for, so if we don't have an online opportunity, those students will leave and go to CAM, Clayton Ridge, Des Moines, to a public school. That's outside of us. They will open and roll out if we don't have that option. So I guess to answer your question, maybe yes to both, maybe. And if it's a service that our students and families want and we can provide it, I just don't believe, and our cabinet doesn't believe, that if you're not being successful in that arena and following through, then we need to change that back for you. Does that answer your question?
Well, yes, but are we doing a service to our families by having online learning? I mean, when you look at the social, emotional aspects, I don't think we're doing them any favors.
Some students are very successful online, and yes, some students it is very detrimental for them to be online and not have that social emotional learning. We're seeing that now to students that are coming back. So, yes.
Well, I'm a firm believer that we've got to get these kids in the classroom, and online learning, as far as I'm concerned, is doing nothing for these students. Maybe a handful of students, but otherwise. And especially our children of need, we are not doing them a service by having online learning for those kids.
I think one thing to consider too is, for example, when we were at the COW Monday night, one of the students and that whole experience with the welders at John Deere, those students are online learners for the most part. So they don't necessarily come to West or whichever high school to take their courses, because the things they may need may not be available when they're not needed at Deere. So there is a segment of the population that this program greatly benefits, and families that truly want this structure for their children versus just but a homeschool program that is created by the parents or families. But you are correct that it is in some cases being abused by some families, and that's our plan to be proactive here in the next month, I'd say, to reach out to families to try to get their commitment to next year, knowing that the pandemic has changed, and we want the ultimate goal is for students to be successful, and we have data from this year indicating that your child probably was not successful with online. We want you to come back in person.
Keep going if you get
Well, just one other example. There are kids out there that have full-time jobs. They're in high school, but they're working 40 hours a week. Okay, so, how can they do that and keep up with their schoolwork? I don't see how it's possible.
I believe that we are in concert with what you're saying. So if they are not following up with their work, then they're coming back. And so what our cabinet is discussing is that we have evidence of our students that are successful and not successful, and we are going to put a plan in place to make sure that whatever environment that is, they're successful. Right now, we have too many students online. We anticipate as we move forward in the future that face-to-face learning will be the place for our students, and that will be a very small part of our population that's online. So I think we're in line with what you're saying and we'll continue to bring that forward to the board to review.
I have both of your names wrote down, but I'm going to get Director Potts in, and then I got Director Gordon online. So just if I give you the nod, I wrote your name down. I promise I'll call on you. Director Potts.
I'm looking at their slide on chronic absenteeism intermediate. So I'm looking at February in person, 43.3. Is that a percent?
So that would mean that 43.3% of students have been absent for 10% of the available school days so far this year. So that could come down if kids start being in person much more frequently. Yeah.
So I'm not a stat person, but if we have an average daily attendance of 88%, how do you have 43% of the kids that are not there? And that's true in every category.
So I think what it's showing is that there are some kids who attend very regularly, right? And so if we look at, the average daily attendance, so if we look at 8th grade is 87%. And again, I'm going to be pulling stats out of it because I asked the same question. So if we have 43% of students have missed 10% or more of the school days, they're eating up the lion's share of that gap in our ADA, if that makes sense. They have a disproportionate effect on that.
Okay, so when you give this 43%, we don't have an end of what the number is. That's what she was saying, right? Now, when you're dealing with these across the board, these kids, is there any triage that's done with this pool of kids that have missed 10%, that you've missed 10%, yes, you had brain surgery. You missed 10%, you have chronic allergies.
Right.
You missed 10%, you got straight A's. Obviously, we need to do more challenging stuff for you at school. Whereas that percent that are not coming to school because they don't want to come to school and nobody at home is making them come to school, and the heck with the fact that it's the law.
Right. And on any given day, we have 88% of our students in school or online, but we have 14,000 opportunities because there's about 14,000 students that could have missed 10% or more. And that's the percentage of that 14,000, that here and there they're missing days. But on any given day, we have 88% of them showing up.
Okay.
I would add to that we do, so you're familiar with our student intervention teams, and I'll give a call out to Mr. Driscoll. Monroe has 3 different student intervention teams, for example. They have one that is academic student intervention team, they have a behavioral student intervention team, and they have a family set. And that family team, they basically look at, and it could be that a kid gets noted on one of them and then it comes up on the other one. And so you look at, oh gosh, this kid is struggling at school, what can we do about that? So we do have people, we are trying really hard to interact with our families and encourage them to come. We can do better, but yes, there are people who are doing that. We have family involvement liaisons. That's part of their work and their job, is touching base with those families. And that's one of the reasons why they would land on the role for a family involvement liaison as somebody to be involved with is chronic absenteeism.
Director Klein-Jerome.
On your last slide, you mentioned tardies. And when I went to 95% literacy observations, it was very apparent that a kid would come in 30 minutes after or completely after the lesson was done. This dealt with absenteeism. Are we also doing the same kind of focus on if they're not there when that lesson is learned, they're not getting it? Just the tardiness of it.
Yeah, and that's such a tricky line because these are little kids, right, that their parents are responsible to get them to school. And even when they come in late, we're glad they're there. They made it. They're going to, be in school the rest of the day. But it is about reaching out and working with the family. How can we get here on time? Because when you're missing that 95% lesson, that phonics instruction to close the achievement gap, yeah, they've missed it. So it's life impacting, and the tardies add up.
Director Klein-Jerome, the SIT team that Mr. Schultz is referring to, that's one of the things. When we look at a student who is not progressing academically, the first question we ask ourselves is, are they even there for that? So then we'll check their attendance and we say, but that doesn't mean that they were there for that, like the first period of the day. So then we check butts in the seats. So we actually will look at tardies and stuff too. There are times that gets passed over because the kid's progressing as they should. And so it's like, man, we do want them here, but they're actually at grade level. So we're feeling okay about that. But yeah, people are watching that too, the tardies.
I mean, I taught long enough in this district. We gave kids alarm clocks. We made phone calls. Are you awake? We would sometimes send people out to pick them up and bring them to school. So I realize this is not just this year's problem or last year's problem. It is a many years problem. But, you know, if you miss it, you're not going to get it caught up.
Director Beck.
I think what I was going to say was about online learning is about relationships as well. That's how you get students to thrive in that environment. And as Director Poston was kind of getting at, in my experience anyway, there's a very small number of students who thrive in an online environment because it requires a different type of student than your typical, you know, when you're face-to-face. So I like the fact that we're looking at how we can make sure that the students who are enrolled in those programs are the ones that are going to do the best in it. But again, I mean, we keep coming back to relationships. And that seems to be the big theme here, whether it's absenteeism, whether it's achievement, whether we're talking about, you know, physical safety, social, emotional health. Every day I feel like we're talking about relationships. Mm-hmm. And it really, I think, only takes one person to reach that student. But it's probably hardest with those elementary kids who don't have the ability to get themselves to school. Mm-hmm. So whatever we can do as a board to help figure this out, let us know.
I do want to apologize and note for the record that Director Gordon is participating remotely. And Director Gordon, did you have any questions on this presentation?
Not at this time, thank you. I did come in late, but what I did hear was very informative. So thank you for the presentation, but I don't have questions right now.
Okay, thank you. Director Poston.
Well, I don't have a question, but I respect Mr. Driscoll's input, but I would disagree with you. You mentioned that if you had a student that was tardy numerous times, but they're at grade level, that's okay. That is not okay. So we're teaching our kids to be tardy. I mean, that's a life skill that they should be learning in school, not to be tardy.
Anyone else?
Am I allowed to ask a question?
Oh, yeah, that's right. Student board members. I apologize. Go ahead, Ms. Alizaziak.
You're okay. So looking at these numbers, they kind of scared me too. I think they're scaring everybody, but I would almost consider myself chronically absent because I've been sick so many times this year, including right now. I've missed every day this week except Monday. So are we looking at excused versus unexcused? Because all my absences, to my knowledge, are unexcused and I have good grades. And the unexcused absences are in direct correlation with credit deficiency at the high school level. So do we have data that says, you know, the unexcused versus excused?
Well, to answer your question, chronic absenteeism, it doesn't matter if it's unexcused or excused. So it's whenever you reach that threshold of 10% or more being absent, then you're considered chronically absent. And if you heard at the beginning, many kids can be considered chronically absent for lots of different reasons. And some of those reasons are just legitimate reasons that you need to be absent.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I remember the last couple weeks we talked about absence being the root of a lot of our academic proficiency issues. So I was just wondering, like, how that reflects, like, the unexcused or excused absences versus all of our educational issues or academic issues.
So I think the best way to answer that question is that if a student's not present in their classroom, then they're not there to receive the learning for that day. And so it's going to have an impact on that student. Where you see the difference is that there are students who have different levels of support in their home environment, or they came into that grade or that content with different levels of proficiency. And so for some kids, it's not as big of a barrier to them, or it's easier for them to recover that. If I have a student in a language arts class, I used to teach language arts here in this building. If I had a student who's already a proficient reader, and is already somebody who turns in their work and they miss a week, it's relatively easy for them to get caught up because I can give them the material and I can say, review this, and I can work with them on this, I can get them caught up. If I have a student who's already behind in their literacy, they're a lot less independently able to make up that work and make up that learning. So I think that's where we're getting in. And Director Poshin, I was thinking about what you had said and trying to square it with what I heard Mr. Driscoll say. And what I heard him say, I wanted to be clear on this, is that he was mentioning none of us think it's okay for a student to be gone when they should be there. I think what he was referencing is that if we're looking in that academic sit meeting and we're noticing that a student's not proficient, the first question we ask when we're trying to decide what do we do for that kid is, did that student make it to those classes? So it's kind of like looking at the problem for the other end. So we should be looking at, are the kids there and how do we respond to that? He's mentioning that if the students aren't being proficient, if they're not excelling academically, then the question we ask is, were they there to get the learning, and how do we make sure that they're getting there? So that's the mindset that we take.
Did you have any other questions, Ms. Alazaziak?
Nope, I'm good. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Thank you for the presentation. I do want to mention that the educational landscape has changed so much. I mean, even when I went to school, technically as a school district, we're just supposed to educate kids, right? Teach the lesson, that's it. We put so many supports in nowadays that it changes the landscape of education. And I just want everyone to take that into account. We can do everything under the sun to try to get the kid to school, but if their parents don't help out, and I know when Director Poshin and I did our school visit, that was one of the questions we had asked. You know, they get bus passes, everything else. We do everything under the sun to try to help support getting that kid to school, but at the end of the day, the parents have to partner and help out too, or family, or whatever the case may be. So we can't take the blame for everything. And I know people like to blame the school district for all kinds of stuff, but sometimes other people have to step up to the plate and help out as well. And I agree with, as far as the data, it would be nice to have hard numbers. It's this many students or this, and I think, like when we look at our data for literacy and math and all that, absenteeism plays into that. Because again, when we were doing our school visits for the 95%, you got kids walking in late. One kid, it was his first day of school and he was a 5th grader. I mean, things like that, and we're halfway through the school year already. Some of that stuff's unacceptable, but that's out of our control, things that we can't do. But again, I greatly appreciate the data and the raw data. I mean, it doesn't look the best, but at least it's out there, and then you all are working on a game plan on how we can try to help these kids be successful. But again, we can implement perfect plans and everything else, but if we don't have partners helping to make it happen and facilitate it, we only have so many funds and people and staff to do the things that we can do. So thank you.
Thank you, guys. Our second presentation, we have Ann Schultz with us here tonight, and she's going to give us an update on our Unified Champions. So we get some pretty cool stuff. This came from a board request from President Goza. Hey, let's get Special Olympics back in the district, and it's just taken off. Director Poshin and I were at Davenport West High School, and we watched the show choir work with in the Unified Champion arena, and by the end of the 45-minute period, there was actually a performance done by everybody in the room, and I thought it was pretty excellent, Director Poshin, and it was neat to see the engagement And I was very proud because there were some Monroe students in there that I recognized. It's hard to see the last time you saw somebody was a first grader and now they're a junior. It's very neat to see. But we have some updates that I think will energize the board and some really cool stuff coming our way.
Thanks, TJ. I am the TLCS PE and Health Innovator in the district. And then, I don't know if you remember, in October, Jen Van Fleet presented for our team, and she pretty much handed the baton off, and I've become the district coordinator for all things Special Olympics and Unified Champions. So thank you for letting me come tonight and give the updates where we're at and where we're looking to go with this.
It's a PDF, so you just scroll.
You just scroll. Thank you. So I'm not going to read you this quote, but I just put it in here because I thought this really captures what Special Olympics and Unified Champion Schools is all about, creating those communities in our schools that promote respect and inclusion and friendships with all students, which directly aligns with our vision, PBIS vision of all students are engaged, safe, and connected in their school. So a quick review of what it means to be a Unified Champion School. It's a program within Special Olympics. And to be a Unified Champion School, you need these three components: youth leadership and advocacy, whole school engagement, and unified sports. So what has been happening since October? In November, we presented to the instructional directors, and then I presented to the elementary and secondary principals and asked them to take the information back to their buildings if they felt like they could get on board with being a Unified Champion School, and then find somebody in their building that would want to step up and be a delegation manager. So in December, we had all our high schools, all the junior highs, Walcott Elementary, Jackson, and Wilson all thought, yes, we could be a Unified Champion School, and had somebody on staff that would want to be the delegation manager. We have special ed teachers, counselor, PE teacher, paraeducator, a whole variety of people that stepped up. Then the delegation managers received their budget. They were given $500 to purchase things for Respect Week, and then started looking for those leaders in the buildings that would want to partner with the ID students. And I forgot to mention, all these pictures are of our own students and activities that have been going on since we started this. And two of those kids I had at Garfield, I was a PE teacher at Garfield for 14 years. So I gotten to see a lot of my former kiddos. January and February was planning for Respect Week. That's something that happens all across the state of Iowa, February 28th through March 4th. And that's the whole school engagement piece, where activities were planned for respect, kindness, all sorts of things. Some schools started unified clubs. Central had a Valentine party, board games, all different kinds of things. Teachers received their materials for Respect Week, and then they started promoting the activities that were going to be going on in the building. So last week was Respect Week, and I put in some pictures. West High had the Marines come during lunch and do team building activities with all students. This first picture is also from West High. The Unified Partners here put Post-it notes all over the whole school with positive messages. There are at least 40 kids running around the building that morning. The middle picture is the robotics teacher at West. They did a unified activity where the kids built the tallest tower out of raw spaghetti, marshmallows, and a piece of tape. And it was really, then he launched the robot. That was super fun. And then the last picture is Central High, and they played games at Unified Partners. That was Jenga. Almost all the schools had a door decorating contest. The first one is a door from North. The middle one is West High Science Department, the Elements of Respect, pretty clever. And then the last one was from Jackson School, and I think every single teacher had a door at Jackson, and then they Google form voted for the top 5, and yeah, they really got into it, super creative. This was North. They pretty much had a every day of the week was a different theme. So this was from Tuesday Character Day, and all kinds of kids and the special education students really got into that, dressing up. And this is what TJ was talking about. This is the show choir event. High fives, fist bumps. The show choir directors took the kids step by step, and then they performed it. Then the show choir also performed for the group. And I just felt like that was super cool.
That was awesome.
Yep, and 2 of these students were my former Garfield Gators too. So what is coming up? This spring, we're gonna have Young Athlete Play Day on May 5th. That's for our K-2 students. It's gonna be at the West YMCA, where they'll get to experience 11 stations, all different kinds of sports. Hy-Vee will cater that event. They'll get a t-shirt, busing, everything's paid for through Special Olympics Iowa. Unified Bowling is on May 10th. And this is just a one-time event where there'll be, athletes will be partnered with a student with and without a disability. All secondary schools will get to participate in that. And then Dcsd Inclusion Night is super exciting. This is gonna be an invitation night, kind of like a gala event, where we're gonna invite the board members, the ILDs, all the administration, the delegation managers. It's gonna be a pretty cool event. And then the last thing here is the Cool School Polar Plunge, which hopefully is gonna happen on May 12th. This is a fundraiser for Special Olympics. 50% of the funds will come back to us directly for the district, and the other 50% go back to the Special Olympics Iowa. So I thought this would be best to just do district-wide. TJ said he'd plunge maybe in costume for the region that has the most funds raised. And it's a mobile plunge unit, so we're gonna park it here in the in the parking lot. The fire department's gonna come fill it up with water, and anybody that raises $25 can come plunge that day. Teachers, board members, anybody. We're gonna try to go all out with that. So what are next steps? I am hoping to have at least 80% of the schools unified champions for next year. So basically that's just adding some more of our elementaries and sustaining all our current unified champion schools. I would love to pilot a unified PE class. That's where it's a 1-to-1 ratio, and both students earn their PE credit and take the class. It's not a helper or a mentor, but they're both just taking the course together. And then hopefully start unified bowling as our first official team, unified team. So that is it. That's what we've been doing, working on, and looking forward to. And I'm totally excited that I get to be part of it. Any questions?
Director Klein-Jerome.
Is there still a statewide Special Olympics competition, and are they going to hold one this spring, summer?
Right now, we're just getting our feet wet with this Unified Champion Schools as part of Special Olympics. So next year, we hope to add a unified sport with the bowling, and that they could go to state, the bowling teams. But I know there's track, there's basketball, there's winter games. So that's a lot more than I can handle within my current role. So finding the right person and getting that going from here would definitely be a goal.
So we are currently talking about that, how best to sustain it. We would love to have a community volunteer help organize that, but we've also looked at what would it look like to have a coach in each one of our buildings or regionally. So we're discussing that. Our goal would be to have a huge population of students going to exactly what you talked about, the track and field events, the statewide competition. So that's a definite goal for where we're going. And Jen Van Fleet still has that on her radar. And remember, this is a project that she's doing as she's going through her master's degree program to be a principal.
Director Beck.
First of all, thank you. And it's so nice to see how much people have embraced this program. It's super exciting. So the Special Olympics that Director Klein-Jerome mentioned, the statewide thing, currently then if a family had a child who was eligible to compete, they could sign up directly, but we're looking to put together school teams. Is that
Yep.
what you guys, okay. Okay, that makes sense to me then. Thank you.
Sure. Yeah, and the delegation managers in the buildings, I think we found the right people, and you're right, they just took it and have rolled with it, with everything happening so fast. So I've been really happy with that too.
Director Gordon, did you have anything?
Yeah, I'm so excited that this is happening again. If students at the high school level want to get involved, who do they need to see in order to do that? Are there things like this going on at the younger age, like the elementaries and middle schools?
Yep. The student could always start with the principal, and then they would know who that delegation manager is. That's the term, the person in the building that's coordinating events. And it's funny you mentioned that. When I was at Central, the kids were handing out the incentives that they purchased for Respect Week, squishy balls and bracelets and all kinds of things. And a girl just said, "Ooh, I used to coach Special Olympics basketball when I was in Bettendorf. How do I get involved with this?" And I was like, yes. So yeah, could always start with the principal and go from there. And the elementaries, we only have 3 elementaries this year, so we're going to try to get them more involved next year.
Thank you.
Did you have anything else, Director Gordon?
I do not, thanks.
Ms. Alazaziak, do you have anything?
Just that it was super successful at West, and I'll be talking about it in my student board report.
Thank you. Any other board members? Thank you for the presentation. Who knew coming from a board request this would grow into all this, and I'm glad to see that we're finally doing this. I've been trying to advocate for this for quite a few years, so I really want to thank Superintendent Schneckloff for as well as all the staff that have made this happen. So thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ann.
All right, that's it for presentations. We'll move on to student board reports. Ms. Alazaziak, we will start with you.
Yay, okay. So on Monday was the big show choir event with Northwest and Central, and Sarah and I attended that, and holy cow, that was really cool. I may be a Falcon, but Central's JV or prep was amazing. That was crazy how good they were. And North's varsity's choreography was super fun and upbeat and awesome. It was so cool to see all my West friends participate and put their heart into it, and they did a great job. Respect Week was last week at West. It had an amazing turnout. My favorite part about it was learning the show choir dance, and Mr. Posh and Mr. Schneckloff were there to watch that, so that was a lot of fun. And then passing out our friendship bracelets to promote inclusivity and friendship around the school. We literally had handfuls and handfuls of bracelets, and I'm not kidding you when I say I would not let somebody walk past me without grabbing one, because everybody had such a big smile on their face, and that was a lot of fun. So thank you to Ms. Reagan and all the other staff who helped plan that at West. Jackson Elementary also celebrated Respect Week with us. They had West High School cheerleaders, and they had a big assembly about it. The ESL program at West is flourishing, so we have students from Africa, Vietnam, India, Mexico, and the Philippines. They relocated here only 2 to 3 years ago, and they have reached near proficiency in English, and their ESL staff is just so proud of them, and I think that they're amazing role models for dedication, hard work, and perseverance. They really just show what the ideal student should be like, and they're just awesome people, and they're the kindest. The West High School math department staff has been working really hard on a book study that started in January and will continue into this semester. They implement the strategies presented in the book, like group work tables, moving all the desks so not everybody's singled out by themselves, just trying to get kids to work together, and they're seeing huge improvements in engagement, understanding, and willingness to try, which is really important. Lastly, the bowling program at West has been doing really awesome. Mr. Mark Schlichting was named the MAC Girls Bowling Coach of the Year. We have some all-conference athletes too. Lexi Bell is second team, and honorable mention for Tyler Smith and Abigail Paper. And lastly, if any of you have ever seen the Student Built House, I highly encourage you to go check it out. It's off of Rylander Drive across from Jackson Elementary in that neighborhood. They have a big sign in the front. It's awesome. They're doing amazing. That's Northwest and Central kids. And it's just crazy to think that my classmates are building a house. So check it out. It looks really nice. It's aesthetic. It's pretty. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Swales?
Yes, so I also wanted to echo what Bree said about that student-built home. It's amazing. I've talked to some of my classmates who are working on that along with the other district students, and it's really insane watching them get over there and just get up on that scaffold and put some siding up. And so I just think that that's such a cool program that we have here, and it's such a privilege that we get to develop trades like that in our district. So moving on from that, we don't have too much going on at North this week with everyone preparing for spring break. It's one of our calmer times of the year. We had Respect Week last week, obviously, and that went really, really well over at North. Unfortunately, a lot of the students didn't know it was happening due to just some poor communication on our end. But for those students that were able to participate, they really went all out, as you saw in some of those pictures. So we are very excited to have that going on and developing as a new trend for us. So also, our show choirs spent Monday at the Adler for the show choir show-off, where they exhibited their shows along with the other Davenport school show choirs. I performed with our varsity show choir at North, and it's always so fun just to be able to see the other show choirs perform. I hadn't seen West's show yet this year just due to some competition things. So it was just amazing to see them come back from not being able to do too much of a show last year just because of the pandemic. And wow, I always love to see both of their all of the Davenport show choirs perform, but oh my goodness, West really blew me away this year. I was very, very proud. And then also today, our varsity show choir went to Fillmore Elementary and performed for the 4th and 5th grade classes. So everyone had a lovely time. It's just so much fun getting to perform for those kids, and they love it. We love it. So love to keep that going. Our first track meet of the season went well, with all of our Wildcats taking respectable places in the competition. They are looking forward to growing more this season and becoming closer as a team, as are the other spring sports teams that are starting to kick into full drive. But that's all we have on the athletic end. But then again, on the arts end, the spring musical, Anything Goes, is starting to come together, and the cast is really excited to start sharing their story with the Wildcat community. So that will be the first weekend in April. If you guys are looking forward to come seeing that, we would love to have you. And then I personally just also wanted to recognize Bree and Maitre for being awarded the prestigious Good Citizen Award from the DAR. I was able to also be nominated and awarded that. And so I had the privilege of spending time there today with Maitre, and is just a lovely time. Bree on it unfortunately was sick, but I just wanted to congratulate her for that as well. So thank you.
Thank you, you too.
Thank you, student board members. We greatly appreciate your insight and all the things that are going on in the schools. Board reports. Director Klein, Jerome.
I just want to echo what you said about, I went to the show choir concert, the 11 o'clock one at the Adler.
Yeah.
It is awesome. All three schools. Love the costumes, the dancing. It was, blew me out of the water. It was very good.
Director Hayes.
I want to report that we had our first meeting for the data wall today, and that went extremely well. So that's something to look forward to later in the year. Also, the board would like to offer our condolence to Sarah Brennan and her family in the loss of her husband, Josh, who was an employee in the as a TAP coordinator at Mid-City High.
Thank you, Director Mack.
I was going to say that the Creative Arts Academy and students at Sudlow did some performances last week, and the steel drum band is 8th graders. It's the only one, I think. It's a unique opportunity. So Dr. Yancey teaches 8th graders how to play the steel drums, and you would not know that they'd only just started this semester, and they are amazing. They have a lot of fun with it. In addition, apparently they have to go before school to actually do it, so it's a pretty impressive program. So it was a lot of fun to watch.
Director Poston.
On Tuesday night, I attended the long-range facility planning meeting. And again, I would just like to thank that committee for all the time and effort that they're putting into this. It's very critical for our district. Just sitting there and listening to the discussions, it's a lot of thought and effort is being put into it. So kudos to the committee and all their hard work.
Director Gordon, did you have any board reports?
Yes, I also attended the steel drum band at the Creative Arts Academy. Full disclosure, I do have an 8th grader in the steel drum band, but I wanted to speak to the talent and the aptitude, I guess, of Dr. Yancey, just having this vision and bringing it together and pulling in kids who have not really ever played instruments before. My son has not played anything. He played, French horn for 2 weeks 4 years ago, and that is the extent of his entire musical knowledge. And he got to come and join this band, and it's amazing. So I just want to let Dr. Yancey know, I guess, and everyone in the district, if you haven't had a chance to go watch the steel band, they're going to be doing a tour apparently in May. They're going to go to a couple different elementary schools to perform, and they're going to have, I'm going to get the other information wrong, so I'm just going to stop there. I will update next meeting. Also, Tuesday night went to the LCAC meeting, and Dr. Beck gave a great presentation, and we had some excellent conversation among the group about how we want to move forward with the educational policy for the district. Dr. Beck, you know what it's called. I can't remember the exact wording. I'm doing real good with words tonight. So it was a really good conversation. We were very fortunate to have a group of people who are very forward thinking and engaged with the community and with the district. So yeah, I think we're on a good path with that. We put together a word cloud, and I believe that we're working on trying to get something like that out to students and teachers in the next couple weeks as well, to kind of get a vision for moving forward with that. That's all I've got.
Thank you, Director Gordon. Any other board reports? I was not able to attend the thing at West on Friday as I was in Ankeny doing a board president's conference for IASB. It was kind of nice being from the district and them wanting me to help facilitate group chats and conversations like that, and then participate in some role-playing stuff as well. So we're moving on up and out of that dark cloud that we've been under. Then also I attended my last kindergarten roundup. It was a little hard, but he just walked away and was all about going into the classroom and checking everything out. So, and then I will be at the play at North because my daughter will be in that. So, any other board reports? Seeing none, we will move on to communications. There were no virtual open forum requests, and it's a ghost town in here, and no in-person open forum requests. So I'm going to move right over communications and go to the consent agenda. May I have a motion on the consent agenda?
Mr. President,
Director Hayes.
I move the board accept the consent agenda as written.
Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Director Potts. Any discussion? Seeing none, I will call for the vote. Director Hayes?
Yes.
Director Potts?
Yes.
Director Gordon?
Yes.
Director Poston?
Yes.
Director Beck?
Yes.
Director Klein-Jerome?
Yes.
My vote is yes. Motion carries. May I have a motion on approval of bills?
Mr. President,
Director Beck?
I move that the board approve the following resolution. Resolved, all claims presented to the board having been duly certified as correct by the treasurer, reviewed by the administration and board members, and they are hereby audited and allowed as just claims and warrants drawn on the treasury for the several amounts. Further resolved, the payment of claims and salaries be approved as presented for the periods of February 23rd, 2022 to March 8th, 2022.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Director Potts.
No.
Is there any discussion?
Director Hayes.
He said it at the same time as her. He doesn't get in there a lot. I was giving him one. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, I will call for the vote. Director Beck?
Yes.
Director Potts?
Yes.
Director Poston?
Yes.
Director Klein-Jerome?
Yes.
Director Gordon?
Yes.
Director Hayes?
Yes.
My vote is yes. Motion carries. Superintendent report.
I have 3 items I'd like to share. Due to the pandemic, several things we were not able to do, but we're picking up some traditions that have been longstanding in Davenport. The first one is the HUG Award, which is helping us grow. It's an award that is nominated. We're tweaking it a little bit. It's going to be the Growing Excellence Award, and we're going to get that up and going. Mr. Vondran has created a really cool certificate, and it's being sent out to administrators to start nominating people and recognizing people. If you've never seen somebody receive a Growing Excellence Award, it's really cool. Because the person that nominates comes, hands it out right in front of the faculty and it can be anybody. So we're very excited about that. Danielle Heller is currently Danielle and Brenda are currently working on our retirement dinner. I'm very excited about that. We haven't been able to do that, and we're going to try and honor anybody that has retired through the pandemic in this next retirement ceremony. It's very interesting to see how much that arena has changed. We used to be able to get a venue and meals and things like that for very easily coordinated. Well, it's almost like sometimes that arena has forgotten how to do some of that stuff coordinated, and so we're planning that for this year, and also the 10 and 20 year recognition. And so more to come on that. We're looking to finalize the plans over spring break, send out save the date. So I'm very excited about that. Our employees deserve to be recognized. Our employees and volunteers deserve to be recognized. They're working their tails off. Thank you.
Is that 30 things?
Yeah. Retirement, dinner, tenure, and hug growing excellence award.
Gotcha. All right. Thank you. Committee reports. I'll just go through them. The Data Wall Ad Hoc Committee. You kind of gave it during board reports, but
We met today, very productive, and Mike Vondran is going to research some information and get back to us.
thank you. Finance Committee.
We met at our last meeting with the auditors, and auditors are going to be presenting tonight. And then our next finance committee meeting is on the 21st.
Thank you.
You don't have a hotline.
Legislative Advocacy. We just finished up with the, I guess not the bus trip, but meeting with the legislators, and we talked about that a couple meetings ago, so. Oh, that's right. And we are gonna be working on, giving an update, to all of our local municipalities. We did a first round, and now we're gonna get back and try to do a second round, kind of where the district's at and where we're going. And the supervisors, I forgot them too. Thank you.
I have a question. Did you send our resolution to our legislators about the vouchers from the last meeting? Oh, okay, thank you.
So yes. LZAC.
Yeah, so Director Gordon kind of got us started. As part of the, this is kind of the policy committee update too, sort of. As part of the policies, one of the policies we have to update is the educational philosophy of the district, which includes the mission and vision statement for the district. And the LCAC is really an ideal group to really help rewrite those mission and vision statements. So we had a great discussion on sort of the best approach for going about doing that. And it fits really nicely in with all of the long-range planning that the district is doing right now as well. We're coming out of the pandemic, it's kind of like everything is turning over. And so it's a great time to revisit those. They've also haven't been updated in a while. So what we ended up with is a plan to start with surveying district staff and students for basically kind of like a word or phrase that represents their ideal Davenport district. And then we are going to collect those words and phrases. We did sort of a sample exercise with this where we created a word cloud out of it. So words and phrases that are repeated get bigger, and the ones that are not as common are smaller. And so we're going to start with the staff and students, and then after that, in the next couple weeks, we'd like to do that. Obviously, spring break is next week. And then at our next, hopefully at our next regular meeting of the board, we'll have something that we can send out to the community as well. And once we gather those words, the idea is those are going to be a great place to start off with the vision for the district. And then fortunately, we had some expertise on our LCAC committee, someone who'd crafted mission and vision statements before, who helped us figure out that, the vision statement is sort of your ideals, and the mission statement is how you get there. So we'll start with the vision statement, and then we also came up with a plan for how we're going to rephrase that educational philosophy of the district, and this will be sort of the first policy that anybody comes across when they look at the board policies. We looked at some samples from neighboring districts and other districts of our size, and it was a great discussion. So
Is that your policy too? Or, Director.
I just have a question. Somebody help me remember when we decided we were going to redo the mission and vision statement.
it's part of the philosophy policy, the policy 101 of the policy books.
Okay, but I don't have any problem with it. I'm just, there seems to be, there needs to be some kind of a procedure. You just, if we're revising something, then there has to be a policy there, and a motion has to be made then to revise the policy, don't we?
Nope, our policies come up for review every 5 years. And the policy committee basically says, here's what we should do with the policy. Then we bring it for discussion. So this isn't going to be the final product. The board still has to vote to approve a new mission and vision statement. But it.
All right, I just have a problem, not a problem, but I just think that procedure here is a little, the cart's ahead of the wagon here. You know, we're changing our philosophy, we're changing our mission statement, and we're having this group do it for us. And I don't know that we ever had a conversation here that we were, you know, saying we need to do that.
Okay, fair enough. I'm sort of following the guidance of some other people, so of taking it out to the community, but we can certainly ask the agenda committee to put it on discussion for us too.
Because, I mean, this, our current has been adopted and voted on by the board.
Yes, and they would have been adopted and voted on there in the policy 101 as part of the.
Okay, but normally when we're looking at reviewing policies, don't we just, we change a word here, we update wordage, we change the times, we change the schedule of the school board, but we don't, I don't know that the policy committee is charged with rewriting the philosophy of the school board and the school district.
You want to have so way back when, the last time we ever talked about it, I think Rick Rule was chair of policy, and we had a discussion on it, and then that's what you're saying, have a discussion on it where the board wants to go with it, and then make that recommendation to, if we have them put together the work. That's what you're talking about, right?
Yeah, I don't.
To make sure the board's on board with
it's
changing the mission and vision statement. I got you.
Yeah, I don't know how much carte blanche we need to give to the policy committee. You know, and I don't, you know, I'm just saying.
Okay, so LZAC committee, the one with the community, is the one that's kind of working on doing that, and it is a policy. I get what you're saying now. Mm-hmm. Okay. Yes, so we could put a discussion item and then have a discussion on if the board wants to adopt, looking at changing it. That's kind of the route you're talking about.
I think that's a procedure that needs
to be in place. I see what you're saying.
That has to happen.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree. I think we outsourced something before we even agreed that this is what should happen, that it should have come here first.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Sure. We got an agenda committee meeting right after this. We can make that happen.
Hold on, can I say something? It's Director Gordon.
Yes.
I just wanted to make sure that everyone understands that just like all of the other policies that the policy committee has been updating, this one also has to be in line, or we want it to be in line with the IASB standards for the policy, which currently it isn't. So I just wanted that to be said also.
Thank you. Did you have anything else on policy committee?
Well, no, I think we've got a number of policies up for, oh, I know what it was. We are just about done going through updating almost all of the policies to that IASB standard. And we have to go back and make sure we didn't miss anything, but we're getting close to seeing the light at the end of the tunnel.
Thank you. Long-range facilities planning.
The big thing was just that our last board meeting, we had the presentation of that information, and everybody's got their packet now. We have a preliminary meeting again tomorrow morning to meet and just, you know, make some future plans.
All right, thank you. I think we got all the committees out of the way. We'll move on to items requiring action. May I have a motion on subject 10.01?
Mr. President,
Director Hayes.
I recommend the board approve the tentative agreement. No, it jumped around. Just a second, I apologize. Okay, I recommend the board approve the WAN Data Circuits contract to Metronet with MRC for $9,800 or $117,600 annually.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Director Potts. Is there any discussion?
Could someone explain the either or? No.
It's probably monthly rate or annual rate.
You might want to use one of those, Gary.
Yeah, it's you can
Gary.
calculate it as a monthly.
Will you use one of those? Sorry.
Yeah, if you want to. Do you want to do that? Yeah, that's right.
It was a courtesy to try and break out the difference between what we'd be paying annually and what the actual monthly cost would be. So it 12 payments of $9,800 would add up to $117,600 annually, and that's a 3-year contract that we have that for.
Okay, thank you.
Any other discussion? Director Kleindrum.
I'd just like to thank Gary for looking ahead. This doesn't expire till June. Here it is, March, we're already looking at it, and you're always looking for ways to save us money, so I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Any other discussion? Seeing none, I will call for the vote. Director Hayes?
Yes.
Director Potts?
Yes.
Director Kleindrum?
Yes.
Director Postian?
Yes.
Director Gordon?
Yes.
Director Beck?
Yes.
My vote is yes, motion carries. May I have a motion on subject 10.02?
Mr. President,
Director Kleindrum.
I recommend the board approve the tentative agreement reached with the maintenance and ratified by the unit for the wage reopener of 7/1/22 to 6/30/23 of the collective bargaining agreement in effect through 6/30/25.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Director Hayes. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, I will call for the vote. Director Kleindrum?
Yes.
Director Hayes?
Yes.
Director Beck?
Yes.
Director Gordon?
Yes.
Director Postian?
Yes.
Director Potts?
Yes.
My vote is yes, motion carries. May I have a motion on subject 10.03?
Mr. President,
Director Kleindrum.
I move that the board approve the tentative agreement reached with ASME Food and Nutrition Services and ratified by the unit for the wage reopener for 7/1/22 to 6/30/23 of the collective bargaining agreement in effect through 6/30/25.
Second.
Thank you. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, I will call for the vote. Director Kleindrum?
Yes.
Director Postian?
Yes.
Director Gordon?
Yes.
Director Potts?
Yes.
Director Beck?
Yes.
Director Hayes?
Yes.
My vote is yes, motion carries. May I have a motion on subject 10.04?
Mr. President,
Director Kleindrum.
I move the board approve the tentative agreement reached with ASME secretaries and ratified by the unit for the wage reopener for 7/1/22 to 6/30/23 of the collective bargaining agreement in effect through 6/30/25.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Director Hayes. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. Director Kleindrum?
Yes.
Director Hayes?
Yes.
Director Gordon?
Yes.
Director Beck?
Yes.
Director Postian?
Yes.
Director Potts?
Yes.
My vote is yes, motion carries. May I have a motion on subject 10.05?
Mr. President,
Director Klein Jerome.
I move the board approve the tentative agreement reached with the ASME paraeducators and ratified by the unit for the wage reopener for 7/1/22 to 6/30/23 of the collective bargaining agreement in effect through 6/30/25.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Director Hayes. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, I will call for vote. Director Klein Jerome.
Yes.
Director Hayes.
Yes.
Director Poston.
Yes.
Director Potts.
Yes.
Director Gordon.
Yes.
Director Beck.
Yes.
My vote is yes. Motion carries. May I have a motion on subject 10.06?
Mr. President,
Director Klein Jerome.
I move the board approve the tentative agreement reached with ASME Custodians Warehouse Security and ratified by the unit for the wage reopener for 7/1/22, 6/30/23 of the collective bargaining agreement in effect through 6/30/25.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Director Hayes. Any discussion? Seeing none, I will call for the vote. Director Klein Jerome.
Yes.
Director Hayes.
Yes.
Director Beck.
Yes.
Director Potts.
Yes.
Director Poston.
Yes.
Director Gordon.
Yes.
My vote is yes. Motion carries. May I have a motion on subject 10.07?
Mr. President,
Director Klein Jerome.
I move the board approve the tentative agreement reached with the DEA and ratified by the unit for the wage reopener for 7/1/22 through 6/30/23 of the collective bargaining agreement in effect through 6/30/25.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Director Hayes. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, I will call for the vote. Director Klein Jerome.
Yes.
Director Hayes.
Yes.
Director Gordon.
Sorry, yes.
Director Potts.
Yes.
Director Poston.
Yes.
Director Beck.
Yes.
My vote is yes. Motion carries. May I have a motion on subject 10.08?
Mr. President,
Director Beck.
I move the board approve policy 604.07 dual enrollment, 601.01 class size, class grouping, 606.02 school ceremonies and observances, 606.03 animals in the classroom, 606.05 student field trips and excursions, 606.06 insufficient classroom space, 607.01 student guidance and counseling program, 607.02 student health services, 710.01 school nutrition program, 710.02 free or reduced price meals eligibility, 710.03 vending machines, 711.01 school transportation eligibility, 711.02 student conduct on school transportation, 711.03 student transportation for extracurricular activities, 711.05 transportation of non-resident and non-public school students, 711.07 school bus safety instruction, 711.10 school bus passenger restraints, and 803.02 lease, sale, or disposal of school district buildings and sites.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Director Hayes. Is there any discussion?
Mr. President,
Director Poston.
I would ask that policy 803.02 be pulled and voted on separately.
Okay.
I think we have to make an amendment to the motion. Yeah.
Yeah. Director Beck, you made the original motion. Are you okay with amending the motion and excluding 8.03.2, pulling it out as a separate?
Yes.
Director Hayes, you seconded that. Are you okay with that?
Yes.
Okay. All right, so the motion's been made and amended and seconded to vote on all policies that were presented excluding policy 8.03 or 803.02. Everyone understand that? So I will call for the vote on all the policies presented minus policy 8003.02. Director Beck,
Yes.
Director Hayes,
Yes.
Director Klein Jerome,
Yes.
Director Poston,
Yes.
Director Potts,
Yes.
Director Gordon.
Yes.
My vote is yes. Motion carries. May I have a motion on subject 10.09?
No, wait, we're still gonna vote on that policy. We're just gonna vote on it separately.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I gotcha. For policy 803.02.
Mr. President,
Director Beck.
I move that the board approve policy 803.02, lease, sale, or disposal of school district buildings and sites.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Director Hayes. Is there discussion? Director Poston.
Well, as I brought up before, I just want to make sure that nothing ever happens like has happened previously as far as sale of property. Director Beck, the wording here is new, that for qualifying real estate, when property is sold, preference is given to the highest bidder. That's new, right? Okay. Mm-hmm. So that's better than what it was. I still feel it should be strictly to the highest bidder, again, because I never want to see what happened previously with the sale of property.
Is there any other discussion? Seeing none, I will call for the vote. Director Beck.
Yes.
Director Hayes.
Yes.
Director Klein Jerome.
Yes.
Director Poston.
No.
Director Potts.
Yes.
Director Gordon.
Yes.
My vote is yes. Motion carries. Now we're on to discussion items. Before we go into discussion items, because that's going to take a little bit, I'm going to call for a 5-minute break, and then we'll come back and dive into all the discussion items. All right, we will move on to discussion items. I will turn it over to the superintendent.
As a part of our annual process, we have Mia from Bonsack Brahma with us tonight to review our annual audit. So Kevin, go ahead and get us started on our review.
Yeah, I was going to mention to round this up and let Mia present. We did present this to the board committee, finance committee. We've reviewed it. So she's here to review it with you tonight. And then at the next regular board meeting, we'll ask for approval of the audit.
So I have summary comments tonight. We did, as Kevin mentioned, met with the Finance Committee and had a more in-depth analysis of all of the audit information. And tonight then I have a presentation to go through the summary level of that. And I wanted to point out that there are 3 deliverables. You have the bound audit document with all the financial statements. And then there are 2 letters that are issued as part of the audit. One is required board communications, which I'll summarize for you now. And then the other is just a few items we observe as we're out here performing the audit. They're not findings, they're just suggestions and observations to pass on to you. So the next slide is the required communications, and if you will, we call it our report card. We actually perform 3 audits. There's a financial statement audit, which is what you would consider the traditional audit, where we're reviewing your financial statements and issuing an opinion on those financial statements. And the district did receive an unmodified opinion on your financial statements. So that's excellent. That's the highest level of opinion you can receive from an audit. So I do want to point out that The audit opinion required an emphasis of matter paragraph is what it's referred to. That is due to the conditional accreditation by the state Board of Education. It's something that is then discussed more in depth in note 14 in the bound document if you want to read through that at another time. But just simply is making the reader of the financial statements aware of what is occurring and what the status is as of June 30, 2021. We also perform an audit called the Government Auditing Standards Audit. This is where we understand internal controls, and we also understand compliance with laws, regulations, and contracts. And in that audit, we did have some findings to report to you. We did go through those with the Finance Committee, but they are summarized starting on page 122 of this bound document if you do want to go into those details. When we look at internal control, we look largely at design of how transactions are processed and then how transaction processes are, whether those design controls are actually being implemented. What you'll see is design suggestions and recommendations. We also due to your level of federal grants, do a federal single audit, which is an audit of your significant federal programs. And this year, the district expended $24.7 million of federal expenditures. There are findings as a result of those audits. There were 4 programs that were tested as part of that process. ESSER and GEAR was the largest program, Title I, and then 2 other programs that were required to be tested again this year. And we did have material weaknesses and significant deficiencies over those. Are there any questions on the results of those audits?
Director Gordon, you got any questions?
Not at this time, thank you.
So I'm now going to go through some high-level comparisons of your revenues and expenditures from June 30, 2021 to June 30, 2020. And the first one is the revenues of the district. And total revenues increased 3% from 2020. That's about $6.7 million. The largest increases. The largest increases are a result of, as you would guess, the federal funding, the COVID-19 pandemic ESSER funding. The other increase was you'll see in the property taxes column. That was due to a 3% increase in your assessed valuation on the property within the district boundaries. Other local revenues includes interest, charges for services, tuition. That is going to be impacted quite heavily due to the pandemic. It also is impacted because of interest rates, which have decreased since 2020, and so that went down quite a bit. In fact, interest income decreased about $800,000 between those 2 fiscal years. It's just simply as a result of rates. The state aid and state appropriations is the largest. State foundation aid is your largest source of state funding. That did decrease about 2% between fiscal years. It's the formula that you're all familiar with. And then again, federal awards went up significantly between fiscal years. In terms of expenditure comparisons, if you look year to year, the change was only 0.4% between fiscal years. That is due to some fluctuation within the capital projects that were going on and the debt service for those capital projects. So excluding that and looking only at your operating costs, which are your instruction, your support services, which are your daily school activities, comparing this year to last year, you had a 4% increase, and that is expected. Salaries and benefits are your largest component, and pay increases were expected to be within that 2 to 4%. At the same time, the teaching staff level of personnel has decreased. It was at 1,203 and then was reduced to 1,114. So most of your significant changes are a result of those fluctuations in your payroll and benefit changes. In the prior year, there were significant projects at Central High School. There was a locker room and a renovation. North High School had a field house project. Those were pretty significant, which is why you're seeing an overall decrease in your expenditures. Are there any questions on the financial information?
We talked about it a little bit in the Finance Committee meeting. It looks like some of our material weaknesses in that had a lot to do with a lot of the federal money, federal grants and that. Yes. So Kevin, what are we going to implement to kind of resolve some of that?
What we did is, what we are doing is we prioritized all of our findings, and we are working on those one at a time so we can get those done with fidelity. So within our controls, we'll handle all of the issues with federal funds. It was a unique situation that happened within one of our funds. That's not something that is a normal entry. So it was a one item entry. But we are prioritizing those, and in fact, there's several of them that deal with our food nutrition service. We've already started that. We've corrected that already. We're working on our payroll accruals. That's another comment, but there were a few others that we're going through those one at a time and fixing those deficiencies.
So none of these are going to be overwhelming as far as corrective actions then?
None will be overwhelming. Some will take more staff than just one or two people. It'll require other departments to get involved, but for the most part, it's just a check and balance that we're repairing. A very simple example is making sure that anything that our receivables don't get too far out. So we have a check and balance that we put in place to watch our receivables. It's not something that we've been super efficient at, but we're have a procedure in place to correct that.
I guess I don't think we asked the question at Finance Committee meeting, but is the receivables a big issue? Do we have a hard time collecting?
It's not a big issue, other than we need to have procedures in place so we have consistency.
Director Gordon, did you have anything?
No, thank you.
I just want to round out with it. I've known Mia and Sarah for a lot of years going through IASBO, but this is my first year being able to work with them directly, and it's been great to work with our auditors, and we'll have them for one more year. So it's been terrific.
And I do want to thank you. I want to thank you for the opportunity to serve the district. It is a pleasure, and we really appreciate it.
Director Sandro.
Thank you. Kevin, on several of the recommendations, it talks about assigned job duty to ensure the financial transactions, and that comes up several times. Does the Finance Committee have somebody that can do that, or I mean, are they on overload and so we need an additional person, or how are we going to address the ones that need additional people involved?
I'll take that one, Kevin. So what we plan to do is we have a standing meeting once a week with our internal finance committee. We're going to take this list and we are going to systemically go down the list. And we have the human beings here through the disruptions that we've had with the changing in CFOs, the changing in federal programs directors, the significant disruptions that we have. It really upset our reporting, and anytime the system gets upset, the end users, the buildings, they still have to move and shake. And so sometimes our processes, our checks and balances get out of whack. So our goal is to, and Kevin and Jamie have been doing a fantastic job of creating the layers and the systems. It's just going to take us a little bit more time. And we're very fortunate to have a thorough audit. So our plan, we believe that we have, well, we're going to evaluate the number of people that we have monitoring our finances. But as you saw the last time here, Heather Harlan, we have a group of controllers. I use that word, controllers, that Kevin has begun to meet systemically with them. So he meets regularly with them, and that's a meeting that hasn't occurred in a while. And they're gonna review these things, look for deficiencies in our system, and put checks and balances in place. So our plan is to immediately meet, look at where our system is deficient, and create efficiencies, and also attach these to job descriptions and evaluate whether or not we are or aren't doing those things.
But
So
you believe we actually have the personnel to be able to tackle these things? Okay.
we will continue to evaluate that during a time of decreased enrollment. We feel like we need to continue working with the staff that we have, but we are evaluating that across all of our departments, and so excuse me. So that's one thing that I'm very optimistic about. Kevin and his team are really beginning to regularly look for deficiencies and disruptions that have occurred and put them back in line into a system with checks and balances. An example of that is Kevin has streamlined some of our purchasing stuff, and it comes to me, and then it's emailed to the next person and the next person, and it has 100% cut out probably a week and a half worth of traveling paper time. And so they're beginning to put, and plus that's a digital record right now that's created, and we can see where any kind of issues have happened. We've had issues come up, and the record of that is instantaneous. It's at our fingertips. Those are some of the things that the next time we come back, our audit will not have these things in here. And the next thing that we're going to do is we are going to proactively ask Mia and her team to proactively test some of our systems. So and proactively say, hey, is this in line with the appropriate practices? So that way we don't go to the audit and find out after the fact. So that's something that Kevin and I have discussed. I don't know if he's discussed that with you or not, but we're going to ask for that.
Yeah.
That way we can be proactive with our systems, or if we are unsure if this federal source can do this thing that we would like to do, then we're going to request that it be tested. That way we have a surety. Kevin, is there anything that you want to add to that?
Yes. One of the things you have to remember for this fiscal year, and you have to use the internal controls lens. Lisa Cruz was asked to do double duty. She's one person, so internal controls do take a hit when you have one less person that is on the check and balance side of things, and that's where Lisa and I together have a much more effective process for internal controls. So when you ask the question about more staff, it's not more staff, it's more of having the current staff that you have in place today that will affect those comments.
Thank you.
That's a great question.
Anyone else? Thank you for the presentation on the audit. Is there any other questions that anyone has? Because we'll be voting on this at the next regular meeting in April. No, March 28th. Oh, yeah, I'm skipping out on one already. Director Beck.
I guess just sort of to put it all in perspective, like, we're pretty good. We're the worst district you've ever seen. We're the best district you've ever seen. We're fine. I don't want to put you on the spot, but just I'm trying to wrap my head around, because, you know, when I see the word significant or unmodified or something like that, you know, my brain thinks of something different than you guys.
I would say that the ESSER and GEAR funding and the COVID pandemic in general, in terms of what it's done to people's sources and resources, has really upended most districts and their financial reporting.
Okay. Thank you.
Anyone else? All right. Again, thank you very much. I am glad to see when things pop up on here, we already have game plans in place on correcting that. That's something that we've lacked for quite a while. So thank you again. Next subject for discussion, Chromebook purchase.
To utilize Karen's language, this is a proactive approach to getting out ahead of supply chain shortage, and you know, Gary and Lisa's team have done a nice job trying to get out ahead of any kind of shortages that we have. So Gary, if you kind of want to walk us through this, that'd be great.
Certainly, thank you. Through the pandemic, and the supply chain issues, we were made aware of the challenges that we would have. And so in the past few years, what we've been doing is trying to get out ahead of it, of course. Things are getting better, but I say that optimistically. They're still having chip shortages and that sort of thing. So basically, every year we refresh about 25% of our Chromebook fleet. We've got about 14,000 Chromebooks in active use in the district. Of those, we do a 3,500 unit refresh every year. This year we're going out again for another 3,500 Chromebooks. We're purchasing the bags to carry them in. They've got a nice logo on them so the kids have a little pride and keep the Chromebook safe. Last year's winning quote was just under $1 million. I think we got our 3,500 Chromebooks and the services and the bags and everything for like $980,000 if memory serves me properly. This year, we'll be doing that again. I do expect there's going to be a 10 to 15% increase this year. We put the RFQ out, and we're waiting for that to come back and tell us who will be our low bidder. Hopefully we'll get somebody who's real aggressive in their pricing so we can get in there. I've got a little bit about the stages of how we rotate through our stock and keep our students in the Chromebooks for 4 years on average as they go through the 12th grade. I don't know if you want me to get into that very much. It's in the paper here, but okay. This year we're discarding the last of our ASUS Chromebooks, and next fall we'll be retiring our Acer 731s. Those are the last to go with proprietary chargers, which has been a big challenge for us in the district because every Chromebook seems to come with its own definition of what a charger should be. And I think there was actually congressional action saying you got to stop that and make everybody standardize on this, and so that's really good for us. So next year, our primary Chromebooks will all have the same charging adapters for them, and so that ought to make everything go a lot smoother for us. We just need to make sure we're out there in front of this and we can get our Chromebooks in time so that we have a smooth start to the school year in the fall. Any questions?
Director Baker.
I have two questions. Number one, what do we do when we retire or discard Chromebooks? Are we recycling them? Are they still functional and we're donating them? Where do they go?
There's laws in the state that say that we can't give them away. We have to auction them off and have a high bid, so that's what we've been doing. The secondary market is not terrible, but it's not great. We're not making a lot of money on any of these things, but we're keeping them from the salvage streams and stuff, so I think that's all good.
Okay. And then my other question is, so does this factor in sort of the breakage, kid drops their Chromebook, somebody's gets run over. It's not just normal wear and tear. This includes sort of what people do to the Chromebooks as well. Okay.
Yeah, we've also adopted an insurance program this year where we've been getting paid for the breakage that does happen, and that's creating some funding for us as well. Helps us keep the Chromebooks in good form. I will also say that the first generation of Chromebooks we were getting had a 3-year lifespan expectation, 3 to 4 years. And the more we learned about them, the more the industry discovered how to create better Chromebooks for the K-12 market. We became a big segment, we really did. And so there's a lot of people out there improving the product. The Chromebooks we're getting, that I hope we'll be getting this year, will be hardened in a way that we haven't had before. The kids were able to flick the keys off, and that always made a lot of work for people. And these are engineered such that there's no way to flip them, to clip them out.
Okay.
So I'm expecting to see a lot less challenges in that regard. So they last quite a bit longer too, and Google's even extending how far the licenses will go for us. Okay. So we might be able to get more years out of them in the future, but kids are still pretty tough on them. So we'll keep watching that and make sure we get it right.
Okay, thank you.
Director Potts.
Do you anticipate that we'll be able to get these delivered, or, and if not, you got a backup?
Yeah, we're not tossing out anything that's really working at this point in time. We've maintained stock of older machines. The challenges we have with that come up when, for example, our ASUS machines had reached end of life, and there was hardware constraints that they could not be updated with the next version of Google. And some of our software said, hey, we're ready for that next version of Google. And so between the two aspects, we had a little bit of challenge making sure that we got the right computers, the right Google Chromebooks into the right grade levels so that we had the ability to do the software that we paid for. It's a little bit of shuffle. It's usually a logistics problem, and it's just getting everybody lined up and getting the work done.
Okay.
Director Hayes.
With the shortages and the delays in receiving goods and services now, seems like everything has been slow. Do you see that there's any type of problem that we would get these books in time for next school year?
I really don't. I think we've got a good plan in place, and I think that we're having the white glove services helping us get those machines done that much quicker. So the new ones coming in, the shuffle is always trying to get the kids to bring in the ones like in the last 2 years they've taken home with them over the summer and getting them back into school and then getting those reconditioned and moved on. Like when we move the Chromebooks that are graduated from 8th grade and we move those into preschool and kindergarten and 1st grade, we have to collect those up, make sure they're serviceable, and then get them down to the kids there. So it just takes a little bit of, it's labor intensive, I guess is what I'd say.
Thank you.
One other question.
Director Beck.
I know there's like a contract that kids sign students sign when they get a Chromebook at the beginning of the year. Do we hold people financially liable for repairs or loss of a Chromebook, or is that something that doesn't really make a difference in terms of?
I'm not sure what the bottom line is on that. I know we do charge the people for the damage, and it goes on their fees, and
Okay.
so.
Okay, thanks.
Is there any other questions on this? I'm assuming we'll be voting on this on the 28th, and you'll have some prices for us then and everything. Perfect. Seeing none, we'll move on to the next discussion. Thank you, Mr. Slope. The North High Gym roof repair.
The next two items are roof repairs. And so does the board have any questions about the roof repairs with us this evening? We feel it's important to move forward with the roof repairs. They're all due to storm damage.
Correct.
And I believe they're all covered by insurance. And so this is our first discussion to get it moving forward. So
you said they were covered by
they are covered by insurance minus our deductible. And so
100% covered
we'll
by
get into
insurance minus deductible?
Correct.
Okay.
What you typically see is in a home you have depreciation on your roof. So if you're 50% depreciated, you're going to get 50% of the replacement value. We are 100% replacement value less our deductible. So we do not have depreciation on a roof.
Director Beck.
I guess it's been a while since I saw a bid for architect plans, probably since before the pandemic. They just seem so high, especially for a roof. Because you're not like, you know, designing rooms and spaces and things like that, but I don't know anything about being an architect. So is this sort of standard? Have prices gone up post-pandemic?
Nope, it's still they do a percentage of the price of the entire roof. And there is a lot of design work that goes into it.
Okay, thank you.
Especially with flat roofs, because you got all the under and everything else, and what membrane and all that stuff. Director Poston.
So, when you hire an architect, are we putting that out for bids, or how are we handling that, or do we just work with one architect?
For the roofs, we usually work with like an architect.
And is that just because they're experienced with the roofs, or?
Correct. They've done envelope assessments of all of our buildings, so they're very familiar with all of our schools.
Or you want to add something? Are there any other questions on this? Great presentation. Way to go.
Well, you got another one. Don't go too far.
That was both for the North High Gym roof and the Davenport Learning
Yeah,
Center roof?
the Davenport Learning Center was damaged in the storm as well, and
Okay.
it falls under the
Turn
same.
your
Thanks, Dan. The Davenport Learning Center falls under the same same financial constraints and everything as well. So,
okay,
same old, same old,
same old, same.
Yeah, it happened on December 15th when we had the derecho winds.
Oh yeah.
So.
Does anyone have any questions on that? Director Poston.
Do we get a quantity discount from the architects?
That's what I'm talking about.
No, we don't.
Oh, we should.
I like your rationale. Bundle. You're trying to bundle. All right. Any other discussion on that? Knock that one out even quicker.
Thank you, sir.
Run.
All right, now we'll move on to discussion item on Timberline agreement processing claims for Medicaid reimbursement.
I'm pinch hitting tonight for this one. Timberline is our third-party vendor for Medicaid claiming, and we're renewing a 3-year contract with them. They only get paid if we get reimbursed from Medicaid, so as Medicaid fluctuates, so does their reimbursement, but it's their system and their process for claiming and making sure we have claims correctly at the correct amount. So this is the service from Timberline.
Director Beck.
Why do we have to pay a third party to do this?
you would have to hire a significant amount of staff that have the knowledge of knowing exactly how to invoice Medicaid. We don't have the expertise to invoice Medicaid. We do a lot of the reporting up front to feed into Timberline, but we do not have the staff or the ability to do all of the paperwork that's required to do this.
So it's kind of like hiring a firm to do construction or whatever. You don't have
Absolutely.
to pay everything.
This is our architect.
Okay.
And the laws change all the time.
Oh, I know.
Oh, time's up.
Over.
So,
I have a question. Director Klein-Jerome. Kevin, could you just give us an example of what would be a Medicaid covered service that the school district would be reimbursed for?
check me if I'm wrong, but they have to have an IEP. The student has to have an IEP, and they have to be Medicaid eligible. Okay. And the services have to be something that's Medicaid covered. For example, if a child has a trach tube and there's regular cleaning of the trach tube, something that requires nurse or para assistance or nurse aid assistance that's normally required, that would be a Medicaid covered service.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Paraeducators as well, Karen.
Director Gordon, did you have any questions?
I was without service there for about the last 15 minutes, so I missed a chunk of things. So no questions at this time. I will just have to follow up later, so no one has to repeat themselves.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions on this? Be voting on this one as well on the 28th. All right. Moving right along to the Davenport plan.
We will be going to the state school board meeting March 24th. I wanted to give a citation update before we go to the state school board meeting. I have forwarded to you the plan with all the details in it. The cabinet has gone in and updated. In terms of the leadership component, one of the things that we are beginning to see is that we're becoming proactive. So with IASB, we have scheduled a meeting on March 22nd where we are going to be role playing some proactive things that we're probably going to run into in our long range facility planning. We have reached tentative agreements, our school board members, our committees with all of our groups, which Kevin found out that it's 2 months to the date. Last year we did on May 10th. That's very proactive. We're moving forward. That allows us to make decisions with our staffing and allows us to put positions out and do hiring, and gives us a clearer plan. And our staffing is moving forward, and I'm very proud of the leadership in this district to do that. We're very fortunate to have Dan and Karen be a part of our bargaining groups, that they bring such wonderful knowledge to that. We've also systematized some of the things that are inside of our boards, and it's continuing to roll forward. So I'm very proud of the leadership. The mindset that we have there is we're being proactive. In our finances, the update from the last time is we are meeting bi-weekly with Cassandra. We're double checking all of the tools that we're using our internal controls. We're testing things to ensure that we are giving the board proper updates. We're, again, utilizing our own internal data. We're cross-checking ourselves, and we're creating structures for staffing discussions that are going to continue to roll forward right now. In terms of our finances, it couldn't be more important. The staffing is, as you saw tonight, a good chunk of how we spend our dollars. Our early literacy section, the team is conducting fidelity visits right now on all of the actions that are occurring inside of our buildings. Probably the most exciting part is that we've been focusing on 95% group, tier 2, tier 3. Now we're beginning to shift into that core reading component. Our team is scheduling letters training, which is language essentials for teachers of reading and spelling, and it is the best training out there. And so we're putting in a place to train all of our early literacy teachers over the next 2 years. It's a very comprehensive training. Once you have it, you see literacy in a different realm. And we're going to begin making changes to the way we teach core reading at the in the early ages. And I'm very proud of that. So our team is turning its focus towards that core reading and its practices. In the area of PBIS, one of the things that in Davenport we sometimes have a tendency to move in education across the nation. We have a tendency to move before everybody's on board. And so our teams have really gone into consensus work. And here's some data to share with you. 95% of our staff reported that PBIS is the priority, and 96% of our staff know why. But probably the biggest impact that we will begin to see is, all of you have knowledge of PBIS. You see the central grit, or the smart SOAR, whatever it is, and then you see the school-wide procedures and practices and things that you see. Where the rubber meets the road is inside the classroom. And Marty Schultz and Lisa Baxter, the two that were here today, and Jake, they've been developing rubrics for inside the classroom. And so they've been rolling those out in our leadership academies to implement, to have teachers implement. A different mindset for us is that central office is not rolling this out. We are working with the leadership teams inside of the buildings who are then going out and ensuring that this is happening 100% of our classrooms. We're obviously not there yet, but that's a sustainable model that builds capacity inside of the buildings and the expertise to roll things out. And that's kind of been the way that we've been rolling a lot of things out. When I say rolling out, implementing an initiative in our district. In terms of engagement, as Director Postian had stated, our long-range facility planning and team meetings has gone exceptionally well. The conversations and the dialogue that are occurring in there are incredible. And the way that is facilitated with board input on the front and ensuring that we are doing our best to get the voice of our community. Where we are heading, we're getting ready to engage a bigger chunk of the community and utilizing surveys and community forums and things of that nature. So our engagement will go through the roof on that. Overall, and another piece to that, we are continuing with our standing meetings with our community members. We are engaging in the city. We meet with the city monthly, and we're beginning to go through our reactive lists, and now we're beginning to plan proactively. An example of that is, President Goza is requesting that the city put chevrons in our major school areas, like outside of Madison, to help remind people, because we have had one student get hit by a car earlier this year, so we're attempting to be proactive. Overall, all of our ratings in the sheet are a 3 or a 4, and that's the first time that's ever happened. I'm very proud of that. Most of them are 4s. 3, or if you remember, on a scale of 1 to 4, 3 or 4 is nearing completion or complete. We are heading in the right direction in every phase. I am now seeing that translate to the classroom, and I've spoke with many of our directors. Our classrooms are becoming calmer. The pandemic is we're turning a corner with that. I'm seeing slow changes inside of our buildings. And probably my biggest reflection as I look at the citations is we, the school board, is leading this charge. And so that is going to be the message that we portray on the 24th. We are leading this district, and I couldn't be more proud of the hard work that goes into each committee. And so at this time, I'll open it up for any questions that you have about our citations or the 24th or things of that nature.
Director Gordon, did you have anything?
None this time.
again, I forwarded you the citation sheet. If you do have any questions, don't hesitate to get them to me, and I'll make sure the whole board gets the answer, or I find the answer to your question. Thank you.
Great presentation. I think we've came a long way. Vice President Hayes and myself will be at the state board meeting on the 24th, so hopefully everything goes good. We're trending in the right direction. I have the utmost confidence in our board leadership team. Did my microphone go dead there? All right. I have the utmost confidence in our board leadership team. Everyone goes above and beyond for an unpaid position with all the committee work and the extra time and everything like that. So I couldn't be more proud to work with each and every one of you. With that, if no one has anything else, we'll move on to policies for board's first discussion. Turn it over to Director.
Okay, so a lot of these are policies that the policy committee went through either with Connie Dobbles from Food and Nutrition Services or Josh Ermansky, our operations director, because they have to do with food and nutrition services or building and maintenance. So the first one is policy 710.04, meal charges. And basically, this is a pretty standard policy that says that we charge for meals. We use a meal account system, and we had our food and nutrition services people put in the parts where we were supposed to fill in the blank. So, for example, how much money a negative balance is before somebody, before the business office can call a family or something like that. So pretty standard. I think, and then also how this policy is communicated at the beginning of the year, and then anytime somebody transfers or when any aspects are enforced. Okay, the next one is policy 801.01, buildings and sites long-range planning. And so the policy committee basically went to Josh to see if these were policies that he recommended that we need. And if we did, should we change anything? So this just says we will have long-range planning, and we will, or when we have long-range planning, we will include the buildings and sites needs for the education program. Policy 801.02 is buildings and sites surveys. The board can engage consultants or other people to help us figure out what the needs are of our buildings and sites. And I'm not sure why those are separate policies, but the IASB has them as separate, so that's why we do. 801.04 is site acquisition. Basically, we won't buy things unless we can, either they already meet our educational program needs, or we have specifications, or we can meet educational needs shortly thereafter. We have a plan for making it work for us. So, for example, we won't buy a school building that we can't use as a school. All right, policy 802.01 is on the maintenance schedule. Basically, it says we'll keep everything in good repair, and we have to have a specific statement about graffiti because there is a legal liability of graffiti that is left unremoved because of well, depending on what the graffiti says. All right, policy 802.03 on emergency repairs. It just basically reflects Iowa law. It says that we can do emergency repairs, but the superintendent actually has to obtain certification from the AEA administrator, saying if those repairs exceeded a certain limit. It was a surprise to all of us that this is actually the standard practice and has been for quite some time. It's a second set of eyes on very expensive repairs, basically.
Director Beck, I think in this policy, when I read it over again, it should say improvements at or exceeding 130,000. Because if something came in right at 130,000, it is not covered because it's less than that or more than that. But what if it was right? So it should be at or exceeding 130.
For the emergency repairs?
In the minor improvements not exceeding, that second paragraph.
I think we're looking at different policies.
Well,
yeah, you're looking, what number are you looking at?
80202.
Oh, I'm on 80203. I must have skipped one. Sorry, that's my fault. I was going through my windows and I must have skipped that one. Okay. Request for improvements. Okay, we'll go back to that one. All right, yes. So this is basically, except for emergency situations, the requests for improvements or repairs are made to the superintendent by building principals and the head custodian. We have dollar amounts of $129,999 and anything you want to say at or exceeding $130,000, just in case something falls right on that mark would be awkward. Okay. All right. Okay, so then emergency repairs, basically in the event of emergency repairs, if they are in excess of the state limit, but they're necessary to control a situation and prevent the closing of a school, the provisions relating to bidding don't apply, and it is the responsibility of the superintendent to obtain certification from the AEA administrator that this was needed. As I said, a second set of eyes on very expensive repairs. Okay, 802.05 is on buildings and sites adaptation for persons with disabilities. Basically, this reflects federal and Iowa disability law that we will include appropriate accommodations in all renovated and new buildings and retrofit where we can. All right, the next one is 802.06 on vandalism. And basically this is that people who are suspected, found, or proven to have destroyed or otherwise harmed school district property may be subject to discipline by the school district if they're under the jurisdiction of the school district, and it may be reported to local law enforcement officials. Persons who are not under the jurisdiction of the school district who commit vandalism will be reported to local law enforcement authorities. Okay. Policy 802.07 on energy conservation. Basically, it's a part of as part of the board's goal to utilize public funds effectively and efficiently. Students, employees will practice energy conservation methods when utilizing buildings, school districts, buildings, and sites. And the only change we made was, it says methods include but are not limited to turning off lights and equipment when not in use, reducing or increasing temperatures, things like that. Josh recommended including the reducing or increasing the temperature because in the summertime, if a building's not being used or a space isn't being used, you want the temperature to be able to go up so the air conditioner isn't running regularly. And in the winter, if it's not being used, you want to be able to reduce the temperature so the heaters aren't running all the time. All right, next one, and the last one is 804.04, asbestos-containing materials. And this policy, from what I understand, is pretty standard. We avoid disturbing those materials whenever possible, and if it has to be disturbed, then we use appropriate precautions.
Hey, President Gosa, what's friable? Is it friable and non-friable asbestos? I figured you know. Josh isn't here.
I do have my asbestos abatement license. So friable means that, so if you have a cracker and it's whole, right, it's non-friable. As soon as you start breaking it and you get all that debris from, that's friable.
Creates
so like-
airborne particles. Yeah.
So the tiles on my floor, when they would...
As soon as you disturb them, then they become friable.
Got it.
Great question.
And that's it. That's our board first discussion. We'll bring him for a second discussion, I believe, at our next regular meeting. So if anybody has any comments or concerns before then, please send them to the policy committee.
Thank you, Director Beck. Administrative reports.
None at this time.
Board request. One board request. Name of board member making request, Director Potts. Date of request, 3/10/2022. Item requested, agenda item. Description of request, a discussion on the possible change to the mission, vision, and priorities of the board. Why are you making this request? We are in the process of reviewing all of our board policies, and this is an item that needs some pre-conversation. When would you like this? At the president's discretion. I like that.
Why do you like that?
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, are there any other board requests? All right, we'll move on to board reflections. And just remember, this is a time for board members to reflect on agenda items that were discussed at tonight's meeting. And I will start with Director Gordon.
I am very thankful for the presentation that Marty and Lisa gave. It was helpful and informative to look at the ways that our district can do better at mitigating absences. I thought that they were innovative in some of their ideas, and I look forward to the district implementing some more things. So that's my reflection. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Gordon. Director Potts.
I think the settlement with all of our bargaining units, because that provides us with a long distance opportunity to plan for next year that normally we don't have. Normally we're signing off finally in May, or if we go to arbitration June. This is a big deal.
Thank you, Director Potts. Director Hayes.
I liked at the beginning of the meeting where we tied in the goals that would match up with the discussions that we had, and also the detailed information on the Davenport plan, looking ahead rather than waiting for things to happen and then work on them at that point.
Thank you, Director Hayes. Director Poston.
Well, I appreciated the presentation on the absenteeism truancy. I'm still very much concerned. When you look at the numbers, I don't see a lot of promising things right now, and hopefully we can turn that around. But I'm a strong believer in that we need our kids in the classroom. And if we're going to improve on early literacy or anything academically, the child has to be in the classroom.
Thank you, Director Prostin. Director Kleindro.
I thought it was nice to see that so many of our secondary schools have embraced the unified champion schools and then the 3 elementary. So hopefully more of them will also want to join this. But I thought it was really great that the secondary schools seem to really embrace it. I appreciate the fact that Gary Sloat is so proactive and looking ahead at what needs to be done in all areas with the technology. So I appreciate that.
Thank you, Director Kleindro. Director Beck.
I think for me, it was the fact that we've reached and voted on agreements with all of our bargaining units. As Director Potts said, that is very important. And to have it done at this time of year, in my history on the board, that's pretty much unheard of. So I was really happy to see that.
Thank you, Director Beck. Student board members. Ms. Swales, I'll start with you.
Sure thing. Alrighty, so I particularly enjoyed the Davenport plan discussion item. I know that as students, we don't really get to see a lot of the administration side of things, but with new opportunities and procedures going on, the difference is tangible in the classroom. And especially like even just in the hallways, you can really see the PBIS procedures taking place. And so getting to see that difference throughout my education as a Dcsd student, it's been really nice to just be able to see that and see those changes being made and getting to hear about it on this end too. So I really like that.
Thank you. Ms. Alazaziak, are you still on with us? No? Okay. I would have probably went to bed too. Superintendent Schneckloff.
I third the tentative agreements. That's huge.
Short and sweet, I like that. I thought we had a lot of good presentations tonight. I really like the one on Special Olympics and that all of our schools are starting to buy into that. I think that's awesome to include all of the students. The tentative agreements are great as well. We were able to get all that wrapped up in a day. So it was pretty, 2 days. But yeah, no, it's good to have all that stuff done and out of the way so that we can move on with everything. The Davenport plan, I look forward to going to the state board meeting on the 24th and getting that done and then see what their recommendations are for us. So with that, Director Potts, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Ayes have it. Meeting adjourned.